With us now on Spotlight on South Lyon is Michigan State Senator Jim Runestad. He's with Michigan's 15th District. Senator, thank you for coming on Spotlight on South Lyon.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Okay, so let's start it off with first question. It's an overused term, but this is a very unique time for us. But it's an accurate term. And I think the question that a lot of people are interested in hearing from their respective elected officials is when is the state of Michigan's economy going to open up? What's your position on that?
Well, when the stay-at-home order is going to end, we're uncertain. I know that in Wisconsin yesterday, the Supreme Court there ruled their stay-at-home order unconstitutional and opened up the entire economy in one swoop. I don't believe that will happen here in Michigan.
Okay.
Currently, we're under the stay-at-home order. The governor has been using her powers to determine what is going to be open and what is not going to be open based upon her definition of essential. There's a disagreement in the legislature. We feel that the criteria should be less on essential than what can be safely done. So that went to the courts. We were given 28 days to decide whether to continue with all of her executive orders and the emergency. We wanted to say the negotiations failed, so now that's in the courts. I can't seem to hear you.
That's because I'm muted. What do you think the timeline is now that it's in the court's hands?
Well, it's in the Court of Claims, which is where a claim or a court case goes against the government.
Okay.
And that's in front of a judge. There's not, to my knowledge, a date set when that's going to be heard.
Okay.
That if that doesn't prevail from either side, it's likely to be appealed to the Supreme Court. And so that could, after a determination is made in the Court of Claims, goes to the appeals court, who knows, or to the Supreme Court, who knows how long that's going to take. Yeah. So literally we could be many months away from a court decision.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, hopefully sooner than that, decisions are made, compromises are made, and things can start slowly opening up and to your point, in a sensible and safe manner. When is the legislature planning planning on being in Lansing at some point to work on this? Are you doing it all remotely? How is that working?
No, 2 weeks ago, we started coming back for session.
Yeah.
And we had session this week. We're going to be, from this point on, as far as I understand, full session Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, plus committee meetings. We just started having committee meetings last week, and then this week on a slower ramped up basis. We're trying to figure out how we can safely do this with all the committees. So we're doing some tests in terms of spacing and all of that type of protocols. Okay. So eventually we'll have all the committee structures up, but the sessions are ongoing now. So we're back at work in terms of the legislating, but in our home districts, my staff deals with hundreds and hundreds of calls, sometimes thousands of calls every week, because there's so much going on.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, what work have you performed to help ensure the safety of businesses and residents in your district?
Well, we initially, the first round of dollars that we funded was $150 million that went out to hospitals and frontline healthcare workers. Yesterday, we just funded another of federal dollars that came in, 500 and what was the figure? 524 million. That's 100 million to support pay for first responders, 10 million for additional testing and personal protection equipment, 125 million for child care services, and some more for other resources to contain the virus. So we have been having ongoing meetings. We're on constant Zoom meetings like this.
Yeah.
when we're not in session, and we're doing everything we can do to fund the necessary funds to help combat this virus.
Yeah, okay. This is a tricky time. Who would have thought, when you got into office, here we are years later dealing with something like this and in operating in our government in a manner that we are today, um, unheard of for everybody. But how are you personally dealing with it?
When this first happened, and I would say in the first weeks, it was very difficult emotionally, not just um, trying to make decisions for my family. My daughter's a senior, and she had to come to grips with there's going to be no prom, there's going to be no
Right.
graduation, there's going to be no graduation parties. There's going to, that was difficult for her.
Right.
The thing that was difficult for me initially was the calls that I was getting for the first, I don't know, 2 to 4 weeks that were so emotional. People were going to a job that they weren't sure if it was a safe environment, or they had a loved one that was in a facility and they couldn't visit them, or all of these very emotional things. I haven't personally got as many of those in the last number of weeks, but initially I couldn't sleep at night because of these stories. I was telling colleagues and my staff the personal stories I was hearing, because my cell phone, a lot of people have that, it was ringing off the hook.
I can imagine.
And so that was very, very difficult. I'm so glad that we now have flattened the curve, and people can at least be getting better levels of healthcare than they were getting in the initial phases.
Okay, interesting. So that leads me to a question about the curve, where in this situation, local, county, state, federal entities are all working together to ensure resources are properly distributed, proportionally allocated, with Michigan being a hotspot or part of Michigan being a hotspot. How do you feel the state handled that in terms of logistics as well as distribution of resources, whether the human resources, personal protection gear, things of that nature?
Well, obviously, as we started this conversation, which of us could have anticipated this level of catastrophe?
Yeah.
Nobody that I talked to said, "Hey, by the way, we could have
Yeah.
this virus come along to shut down the economy." And
Yeah.
there was a lot of lack of understanding that this was going to be a big issue, probably in every state.
Yeah.
But I would say that we've been pleased with the level of support we're getting from the feds. There was a push early to open up a huge facility down in Detroit. I know the Suburban Showcase was opened up to start taking cases, and then it started trending down. So we didn't need that as much, but we needed many of these other, personal protection equipment. We're now have received $3.7 billion from the feds. 700 million went to all the counties over 500,000 people. And we just, like I said, we funded another 524 million yesterday, but there's more that we have from the feds to continue spending. So I think we're going to be, in terms of that, dealing with the virus, we're going to have the money to get the resources in the right places.
Yeah.
It's the economy
Yeah.
in Michigan that is not going to be an easy solve, and that's going to be something that's going to be devastating for years to come.
I understand, and I hear you, and you kind of touched on the answer to this next question already. Which is, what's your position on businesses who are ignoring executive orders, opening up their business, such as our friends in Owasso and other service businesses? What's your position on that?
It is such a difficult thing because I understand their plight. There are businesses that every single thing that they have worked for in their life, maybe generations they have worked to build this business, and then they have employees that they feel are their family members.
Yes.
And they see all of this crashing down in a heap where they could go into foreclosure, bankruptcy. If you're not in that situation, it's pretty easy to dismiss, oh, just live with it. But if everything in your world is dependent upon that business, you can understand why they're concerned if they don't get it open and running. I wouldn't advise going against the power of the governor at this point, because licenses can be pulled. You don't know if law enforcement will get involved, but it's very difficult. We have advocated in the legislature all along, let's look at what is safe. If you could safely cut hair, then let people cut hair. If you could safely cut a lawn, then let people do any of these jobs that there's protocols and safety that can be put in place. Because if we keep it shut down in this arbitrary way, this economy is going to be like a meltdown that will make the 08, 09 meltdown look like nothing. That's how bad it will be.
Yeah, I understand. Well, I appreciate your feedback on this. I appreciate your time. Is there anything else, Senator, that you wanted to add before we wrap up?
Yes, we're dealing with literally hundreds of calls on unemployment insurance a day.
Yes.
I've posted it everywhere. I posted it in South Lyon that my staff is helping with these, and we're seeing, I'm seeing results online of all the people saying, I called Senator Runestad's office, they resolved the issue, we're now getting our unemployment. So if people are having a problem, sometimes you get snarled up in a bureaucracy and it seems you can't find light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Give us a call, because we're burrowing through that tunnel and making sure people are getting help.
Excellent. That's great to hear. Well, I appreciate your time again. Great information from you. Hopefully we'll chat again soon about more positive things.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. All right. Have a good evening.